Welcome, everybody. Dr. Josh Long here with AME Podcast, kind of my quest to look at music education beyond the classroom, the lifelong learning in music education, folks who continue making music throughout their entire life. We're sponsored by Art and Music Emporium, which is serving artistic excellence. We offer things such as lessons, repair, and you can learn how to play an instrument. So I'll throw that out there to you. We also do other performance initiatives, such as the annual Wildwood Band by the Sea, Community Band by the Sea, excuse me, down in Wildwood, New Jersey, as well as the Bethlehem Steel Company Legacy Band. Those two programs for 2024 is already finished. However, we're looking into next year of doing something in those realms. So if you are interested in them, please keep in touch. We actually have individuals come out and play on a Friday and kind of one rehearsal, and then we do the concert the next day. So it's been a lot of fun. We're actually gearing up for our next public performances, which is Tuba Christmases. So stay tuned if you're interested in that. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel so you can hear when new videos do come out, as well as if you're on Facebook, do like Art and Music Emporium or Joshua E. Long, just so you can kind of stay in touch and see some things that we are doing in our progress. And we also have a Patreon account if you're interested in contributing. Again, all the proceeds go towards helping people continue lifelong learning in music education. I'm really excited about my next guest here. Met him while I was working out in the field, in the higher education field, which I still do, and been a great friend, great guy to talk to about different things of music and also different kinds of music. I know he a percussionist, and I know he's done quite a bit of study in Ghana and done a lot of things in world music. Still a professor of music, and he's actually the dean of international programs now. So it's really cool to talk to this individual to get kind of a different perspective of what I've been just sitting in, what I call community music in the United States. So give it away for Dr. Gavin Webb. Hi, Gavin. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Josh. It's good to see you. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for being on this. I know we talked about this, and I'm excited to hear. So I thought before we kind of open up the box of this more diverse, beyond the United States music, because I know you have like tons of information about that. I just thought I'd ask you a little bit about just how you kind of got started in music and what kind of things, we can lead up to as much as you want to share and lead up to, kind of a couple things that you do still today, and we'll start
Sure.
there if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I think I started in music fairly late in life, actually. I think, let's see, I was maybe 12 or 13. My brother played classical guitar, and my parents offered me an opportunity to play an instrument. I was very into sports up until that time, and I had a few friends that played the drum set. And so, really, the drum set was my introduction into the music world. And so, really got into it, started taking lessons where I grew up just north of Toronto, and started playing in bands all through high school. Probably a typical story that you hear from lots of people who grow up in the suburbs and start to play music. So did that all through high school and became very interested in that. Started learning about all different types of music, started getting into jazz, slowly kind of gravitated into the music, formal music kind of
Hmm.
courses in high school. It's kind of an outsider that came in a little bit late in high school, but started taking music there. Eventually decided I wanted to study music full time, and so applied to Berklee College of Music, got in, where I did my undergraduate degree. And it was really through Berkeley that I started to get introduced into, well, I initially got in, interested in jazz and funk and rock and
Hmm.
all those different types of styles. But it was really at Berkeley that I started to get introduced into music types, outside of North America or Western Europe. And really was Berkeley that kind of, helped me kind of pique my interest in different styles of music, whether it was from India or different parts of Africa or the African diaspora or different parts of the Caribbean or the Americas. And really, it was that kind of set the stage for what would later become a career path in ethnomusicology. So that was really kind of how it all started.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's very cool. And if I may ask, this is something I don't even know. I know you mentioned, earlier on you got in bands. Were they typical high school bands, the typical instrumental performances on the concert, or was it more just kind of jazz groups? Because I know you're in percussion,
Um,
and I never asked you
yeah,
that question.
yeah, no, like I said, I didn't, I wasn't a percussionist as such. I was
Oh,
a
okay.
drum set player, and there were bands that we were playing like, initially it was kind of lots of classic rock, AC/DC.
That's cool.
We were playing Triumph, Rush. I'm a Canadian boy, so you can't be in a band without trying your hand at Rush. As I got a little bit better, things got a little bit more progressive. Interested in bands like Yes, and trying to play some of those covers. And then kind of later, by the kind of towards the end of high school, was taking it a lot more seriously, was playing in bands that we were writing our own original material, but very much into groups like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Jane's Addiction. I was a huge Fishbone fan. So we were playing lots of Fishbone, but also like Steve Vai covers and Joe Satriani covers. And, so it was just kind of an eclectic mix of all different types of music. Some of it was just stuff that, we were into because we were going to those bands. Some of it was more kind of geeky musical stuff. And we just kind of, would play that material, started playing that in bars as I got a little bit older, old enough to play in clubs and bars and whatnot. So that was really the styles that we were kind of engaging throughout high school. And there was quite a community that actually grew up in where I
Hmm.
grew up in Newmarket. There was lots of different bands that were in the area. So whenever there were parties, there was always bands playing. There was always jam nights or jam sessions happening. So it was a vibrant music scene that kind of grew up through high school, and I think that's really what helped kind of propel me, kind of move me forward.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and if you can remember, and I know this is, and I know this is hard to think back, and I'm not trying to by any means say anything about
Not going to
age. I
tell you
kind
how
of
old
think
I
back like
am.
it's like I,
Yeah,
I think back to when I started music. It's like, wow, so long, it was a long time ago. I was just wondering, I mean, other than, the popular side of it, what kind of inspired you, if you remember, just to, kind of to play in these groups and to do jam sessions and, to do these kind of things, to get into, and you created like this whole little community of a
yeah,
group of musicians together, right? You had your bandmates, you know.
right, yeah, yeah. Well, I guess some of it was camaraderie.
Okay.
These were bandmates, but they also became my friends.
Uh-huh.
Um, I always tell my kids I kind of moved in different circles in high school. I had like some friends that were in sports, some friends that were in
Hmm.
the arts, and then I had my musician friends. And I think slowly over time, I kind of gravitated more towards my musician friends. And then I think through that in my own school, I started to become friends with that were musicians in other high schools in the area. So kind of really expanded my circle, and it became a kind of a broader kind of musical community that I was involved
Hmm.
in. Um, yeah, I think camaraderie, just the love of music, the passion of music,
Hmm.
the enjoyment of talking about music, and what inspired us, what kind of bands we were into, what kind of musicians we were into. It just became a whole part of my kind of social circle, but increasingly, I think also an important part of my identity.
Hmm.
I guess as I kind of got older and towards the end of high school started to I applied to Berkeley, and I got into Berkeley, and so I think by then music kind of formed an important part of who I was, or how I kind of saw myself, I guess.
Yeah.
Thinking back on it now, several
Yeah.
years later.
Yeah, I know. And you brought up the word identity because, and of course I've always known you in this kind of world of music making. And it's interesting, how you're thinking about that, how it kind of started identifying yourself. And I guess, I think about myself too. I guess, yeah, I've always been involved with bands and,
Yeah,
obviously, but I guess as you move forward kind of in Berkelly, and then I want to dive into, kind of
yeah,
your international studies and everything. But like, how did that define you? And I want to say define you as like how like and I because I'm always looking for this motivation. You know what I mean? And I know
yeah,
it's hard to say that. And the reason is because I see people such as yourself who dedicate so many years to music and to
yeah,
telling and to being upfront to tell people about music. And that's what's interesting to me. And that's what, my quest is to show people this out there because,
yeah.
it's there's so many people like yourself. And I just didn't know, is there any underlying and maybe there isn't, is there any underlying motivation that you saw yourself, especially as you were, getting into jazz or getting, going through Berkeley? I mean, Berkeley's a great place to study. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah, well, I think I think it also changes as you get, those are formative years.
Hmm.
I started Berkeley when I was 18, and then I graduated when I was 22. And you can imagine how different a person is between even the ages
Hmm.
of 18 and 22. So I think maybe the identity, if I'm to think about it, maybe and could I trust my thoughts? Could I remember that far back and trust myself fully? But maybe it was a little bit more of, I want to be a professional musician when I was kind of finishing up high school and going into Berkeley at 18. And then I think getting to Berkeley and to be in an environment like Berkeley makes you quickly realize that, you know, um, you start to kind of easily figure out where your strengths and your weaknesses lie. It's a very competitive environment. You can imagine, well, it's, I think doubled in size now. So at that time, Berkeley was maybe 3,000 or 3,500 students, and they're all,
Hmm.
have, well, they're not all there to be musicians, but they all have a musical background. And then
Right.
you start to realize, well, this whole music thing, there are different things that you could do with it. You could
Hmm.
study music business, you could study film scoring, you could study music production and engineering, you could study composition. So all of a sudden you start to see that there's all these different kind of trajectories within music, and I think that partly impacted me as well to start re-examining where my passions lie.
Hmm.
And then also, some of it's just being realistic. Like, okay, well, eventually I'm going to graduate from this place. I'm going to have to find a job. So I think I slowly, my second year, I think I decided I might want to do the music production and engineering track.
Hmm.
Then I left that. Then I really started to get into world music, quote unquote. In other words, I started to study, like I studied with Giovanni Hidalgo. So I was learning about Afro-Cuban music, and there was another guy named Saw Davis. I studied with Jamie Haddad and started to learn about music types from like North Africa and
Hmm.
the Middle East, and studying the bendir and I was studying music. So and then as I kind of got deeper into my time at Berkeley, I started to, as I mentioned, I was considering the music production and engineering track. And then as I got a little bit deeper, maybe into my third year, I started to take music courses that engage
Hmm.
different parts of the world. I studied with Giovanni Hidalgo and Sa Davis and a couple other people that were teaching mostly kind of Afro-Cuban traditions. I studied with Jamie Haddad, took courses with Jamie Haddad. So we were learning about, the bendir, the tar, the bodhrán, kind
Hmm.
of, hand traditions from North Africa and the Middle East. Also learning about I guess he had studied, or he had done a lot of work in India. So we were
Hmm.
learning, a bit of the Kanjira and the Mridangam kind of hand techniques, and learning some of the counting systems and learning how to play in different meters. Ed Uribe was teaching courses on Brazilian samba and bossa nova. So I
Hmm.
was taking courses looking at those traditions. And then Joe Galeota was teaching courses on, or teaching classes and courses on West African drumming traditions. And so
Hmm.
I really started to kind of get interested in starting moving away from Fishbone. I still love those bands, but Fishbone, Chili
Sure.
Peppers, the jazz stuff, and kind of really getting interested in learning about music traditions from different parts of the world. And
Hmm.
through that, I met a couple of people who were ethnomusicologists. And I think I always had this impulse. We talked about identity already. And I think there was this kind of interest or impulse in me to kind of learn about music from this kind of anthropological, or have this kind of experience where you go into
Yeah.
a community and you learn music within a community that maybe you're not from, or you can learn within your own community. But this idea of studying a music tradition in depth, and from a number of different perspectives. And I think that's what really kind of generated my interest in kind of moving towards ethnomusicology, or this idea of kind of looking at music from an anthropological perspective, and trying to kind of become a master of a particular tradition. And so I think, so there was this kind of slow evolution during my time at Berkeley, from this
Hmm.
kind of naive 18-year-old with a Pearl Jam t-shirt and a Bad Religion baseball cap. I'm going to be a professional drum set player. Towards the end of my time at Berkeley, realizing that I think I want to apply to grad school and kind of do this ethno thing, without knowing all the problems that that come with getting tenure track positions and whatnot.
Yep.
That's just what the next move was for me.
Yeah.
And so it was as a result of that I went back to Canada, and I ended up becoming very involved in the Ghanaian music community in Toronto. Became for a couple of years, and kind of used to go and play with them at different events all over the city.
Uh-huh.
Anytime there was a birthday party or a wedding or a funeral or anything, I would go and play with them. So there was this community of Ewe people that were that had formed in Toronto, and then me, this guy from Newmarket, would show up, and I just wanted to hang with them and play and try to learn the language as best as I can, and be immersed in that kind of situation. So that's really what kind of, I guess, piqued my interest or generated my interest in kind of moving into that area. Plus, I had gone to Ghana after I graduated from Berkeley just for 2 months, just as a
Hmm.
result of a professor that was there, Joe Galeota, who I said as I was graduating that I wanted to continue learning more about this music from West Africa, this Ghanaian style music. And he recommended I just go, and he hooked me up with this teacher. And I didn't know you could just go to Africa and learn music. So I did that for a couple months right after I graduated Berkeley, and then slowly started to kind of think about graduate school, and that kind of set me on the path of where I ended up, where I am now.
Wow. Yeah, definitely. Well, that's cool. Yeah, because that was going to be my question of how you kind of morphed into what you do today. Because it's I know you in that realm.
Right.
And
Yeah, well, it's partly, I guess the other you've already acknowledged I work in international programs. So I was at the University of Ghana. I'd finished graduate work, my master's degree there, and I was trying to stay in Ghana as much. I'd spent about 2 years there by that time. I just didn't want to leave. So I got hooked up with a guy who was trying to start up a radio station, and so I kind of put all my eggs in that. I'm gonna work and try and help this guy set up this radio station in Accra. And eventually that kind of fizzled out, and that wasn't gonna work. So I had about a month or two left of money before I had to leave and go back to Canada. And it just so happens that one of my friends was teaching an American, at the university, and asked me to come and help. She wanted
Mhm,
to do a recording. So
mhm.
he was going to play the lead drum. He asked if I could just come and play the bell part. So I did, and as he was kind of we're all setting up, she mentioned that she was a director for this organization that specializes in international education study abroad. And she
Okay.
was the director based at the University of Ghana, and said that she wanted to leave. She wanted to go back to East Africa, and asked me if I wanted to apply for the position, and I said sure. And 6 months later, although I had left Ghana, 6 months later I came back, and I started off as the academic director for that program based at the Institute for African Studies, and that was in 2000. So that's what set me off on my trajectory in international education. So
Yeah.
you never know where any of this stuff is going to take you. You just have to be kind of nimble and prepared for whatever opportunities present themselves to you, and follow them.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the crazy thing too is like, even though I know it seems you're focused more on international and not necessarily music in general, I feel it fits hand in hand because it's essentially the same. You know what I mean? And just because your interest, anyway, that's what I mean. The interest of your music going in that direction. And I was just interested, like, as you were like and you might have said it a little bit, and I thought maybe you could expand just a little bit. You mentioned a comment about how it was neat how you could get different perspectives of what people were doing in the community. And you know me, I'm a community guy. So I'm going to ask you that question. So what found most fascination to you and in your ideas of wanting to dive into different communities and understand how they make music? And you can also be a little bit broader too,
Yeah.
because you're in the more
I think
international world too.
Well, that's really what I think ethnomusicologists are doing at the core. I mean, obviously, it's the field has really branched off into lots
Sure.
of different areas, but at the core of ethnomusicology, or was musicology before, um, is this interest in trying to learn how, one, learning about music from any other part of the world. And I
Sure.
think one of the things I realized in kind of growing up in school, or kind of growing up and going at least in high school and seeing
Hmm.
conservatories around and working in university settings, that there's such they the departments seem to look at music with blinders on. Like they
Hmm.
really only focus on music traditions from, North America or Western Europe.
Yep.
I think any
Hmm.
ethnomusicologist will tell you the same story that, there's
Yep.
usually one person in the department, unless you're like Wesleyan or UCLA or something like that. But most schools they have that one person who teaches non-Western music. And I think I grew up and saw that a lot. But one of the things that ethnomusicologists uh, are interested in doing is learning about traditions from all over the world. But secondly, I think we're interested in learning what is the meaning and significance of music within people's lives, within the communities for which they reside. And of course, community is a flexible term. It can be, it can be transnational community. It can be a community of people within a region, but it can also be a small community. And so
Hmm.
what we're doing, I guess, as ethnomusicologists, we're trying to draw a circle where it makes sense around a musical community, and trying to again understand what the meaning and significance of music is within that community. And that's really what our job is. And we employ ethnographic research methods, which are essentially anthropology. But we also rely on music theory. So
Hmm.
once we're done kind of giving it or taking conducting interviews and speaking with people and taking pictures and doing and recording music, and eventually we have to sit down and put our music theorist hat on and transcribe it and try and understand what's going on, and try as best as we can to make some sort of connections between what it is that we're observing in the field, but also what it is that we're
Hmm.
listening to. um, so I think community is really at the heart, I think, of traditional ethnomusicology. And again, as I mentioned, the field has expanded quite a bit now. So, there might be people who look at ethnomusicology in a much different way than that.
Yeah, no, 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 that makes sense because I mean, and I think all over the place. I mean, music means and matters to people different ways and how they use it and how they celebrate it and how,
Right.
and it's just it's fascinating to me that you were looking into that celebration of the different communities and the different traditions and kind of learn. And if and don't be I don't want to be coy here in asking this question, but when you kind of latched on to, and I mean, it could be Ghana, or anything like that, what did you find? And I'm actually the big deep. I know there might not be a perfect answer for this, but like, what was the most fascinating thing that you found? Because like, only reason why I'm saying, and I'm gonna throw this out there, and I don't even know if it's it. The pictures I've always seen you involve drumming. You know what I mean? And I'm just wondering if it's just that and the rhythms that you're hearing, or, I don't know. I just thought I'd ask.
No, it's I was drawn to the music, absolutely, and it's community music. It's
Yeah,
um, there are traditions in Africa where you could have a single instrumentalist, like maybe a griot or something like that. But
sure.
the drumming traditions that I've been most interested in within, not only within Ghana, like I've had the good fortune of, I studied bata in Nigeria for a bit as well, and
Mm-hmm.
studying djembe in Mali, and doing recordings all different parts of West Africa, Togo and Benin and elsewhere. These are all traditions that require lots of people within a community in order
Right.
to realize, to make them happen. You
Yeah.
know, they are. It's funny. They're like kind of big opera. They're like it's like almost. I used to try and tell my students, that have that don't understand maybe traditions from outside of Western Europe and North America. It's very much like operatic music. You've got a whole section of singers. You've got a whole
Mm-hmm.
section of musicians. You've got costume. You've got drama. I mean, all this stuff is kind of integrated, and so
Yeah.
it requires a community of people to play it and perform it.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to sit down with two people and have a meaningful experience playing a lot of this type of music. But it
Right.
is community-based music. Um, Professionalization, I think traditionally wasn't that much of a thing. If you go to the villages even today in Ghana, the kind of main lead drummers, they could be farmers, when they're not playing, or they could be,
Right.
taxi drivers, or they could have a shop where they sell goods. So in other words, I mean, they're afforded this status as important musician, but not professional in that sense. And so they
Right.
belong to these, especially in the Volta region where I've spent a lot of, my time kind of looking at different types of music. They belong to these kind of community ensembles, which
Mm-hmm.
come together. They're called habobo, and they tend to be they tend to be formed based around kind of they're like these mutual aid societies where
Hmm.
people come together in times of need. When you're a member, it's almost like a funeral insurance policy. You
Right.
pay into it, and God forbid when it's your time and you die, the community within the
Hmm.
or the organization comes, and then maybe they'll give some money to your family to help you, with your burial. They'll make sure that there's a proper befitting funeral for you, which includes music, critically, which includes music,
Hmm.
and that'll be a wonderful performance. And that you're kind of afforded this important moment in your afterlife, to ensure you're kind
Right.
of sent from the physical world to the spiritual world, if you will. So,
Right.
these are community is a very much a kind of critical part of how music is performed in many of these traditions. And of course things are changing and whatnot, but
Sure.
I still think that's at the heart of it, and particularly in traditions in the Volta region, which I've been talking about.
Yeah, and one thing, if I may ask about, their kind of connection and their interest of engaging, into that kind of music. And what I mean by that is, for example, you bring up the professional, and we're not here to debate the professional or amateur drama
Mhm.
because people will say
Yeah.
professional, you get paid and all that kind of stuff. But I'm looking more of like how you're saying, where there's a farmer or, a cab driver or somebody, but there's a performance happening that they need to be a part of. They're there. And I was
Yeah.
wondering, did you dive into any of that side of it of kind of their motivation or dedication?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt that they have, this artistic impulse and this
Hmm.
passion for it. Not, I don't want to overstate the utilitarian nature of it.
Right. Sure.
They are artists.
Right.
When they perform, they perform. I mean, you marvel when you watch them in the course of a performance, and they're deeply passionate about what it is that they do. But
Hmm.
it's just part of what they do. Um, and on top of that, you may ask them, well, how did you hone this skill? How did you develop this, ability? And a lot of times it'll be maybe spiritually connected, it's like it's a
Hmm.
gift from God or something like that. But
Sure.
there's an immense amount of practice and training that might not look like the way we train, in terms of taking private lessons and you pay your teacher $50 a half hour, and you
Right.
do it twice a week, and your mom or dad screams at you to go and make sure that you practice. It doesn't work like that. It works differently, but despite the fact that it has this kind of important, community and functional
Hmm.
dimension to it, despite the fact that it might just be one of a few different things that they do. I wouldn't want to take away from kind of the deep artistic,
Hmm.
feature of it as well. They are tremendous artists, and yeah, when I hang out with them, I feel like I feel very pleasure or feel very
Yeah.
happy to be in their presence and learning from
Yeah.
them. So, and even greater if we go to a performance and they invite me to come and play. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, and that's awesome. Well, the reason why I'm asking those questions is, exactly what you just said. You kind of hit the nail on the head, as I call it. Be a little saying I'll say, but it's the fact that, you know, in today's world, and I'm looking in the US, just exactly what you said. It's like we force music on some folks, and I'm interested about when it just clicks for somebody, where they just want it and they just are so savvy and they just want to continue regardless of what. And that's kind of, what I'm looking into and
Yeah,
trying to figure that out, whether or not I ever will figure that out. And that's
yeah,
why, it's interesting to me to hear that from you, especially in different areas and different countries and different things like that, where none of that other stuff really matters. It's matters of their engagement and their dedication and their performance and their artistry. And
yeah.
it seems like it means more, and that's what I'm diving into. So that's why, like that's why I'm asking those questions, because like I'm
Yeah.
hoping to inspire others to do stuff that way, do music making that way, rather than,
Mhm.
oh, I'm in the high school, I'm just going to play in the high school band, or oh, I guess I'll play in the community, that
Yeah.
kind of thing, where they're kind of engaged that way. And that's, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess people are just self-motivated
Yeah.
to do it, like you have to want to do it. I suppose, like, I would be lying to you if I didn't say my parents were a bit concerned when I told them I wanted to go to Berkeley and study music. I mean,
Sure.
that's all right. Like neither of my parents, were musicians. They both had professional,
Yep.
careers that they were, paths that they were
Yep.
pursuing. And so, it'd be like, like I want to be a comedian or I want to be an actor. I want to be a musician. These are professions which are highly rewarding, but
Yep.
we all have a million stories of friends who've
Hmm.
pursued this path, with the aim of trying to establish a career out of it, and just it just doesn't work. It's a highly it's a maritime it's a highly it's a very difficult industry to kind of break into and
Yep.
eke out a living out of. So you just have to be. I just assume that you have other people that say the same thing. It's some sort of impulse within that drives them to want to continue to learn this. I think what drove me a lot of the times when I was in Ghana was I was stepping into a tradition that I was stepping into a set of traditions, not just tradition. Ghana is not a monolithic musical. There's not this monolithic music tradition that defines Ghana. That there are music styles from all over the country, and so I was focused a lot on Ewe music from Ghana, southern Ghana, southern Togo, and parts of Benin, and I was
Hmm.
interested in Asante music from like Kumasi, that area, and very much I did my PhD on Ga, the type of Ga music from Accra, and those are very distinct. Maybe from an outsider, they all sound very similar. Singing, drumming, bell parts, and whatnot. But for an insider and watching these traditions and getting to know these traditions, they're very distinct and very unique from one another. Um, I forget where I was going. Where am I going with all this? Oh yeah, I think one of the things that drove me was, as an outsider stepping into these traditions, I had a lot to catch up on, and if I wanted to
Sure.
go and hang, in these performance contexts, I needed to try and figure it out. And I think I spent hours and hours and hours and hours of transcribing, practicing, for all the years that I was there, practicing and just trying to kind of develop my skills to the extent that I would be able to kind of, go to a funeral or a wakekeeping or a
Right.
performance event, or an outdooring or whatever it may be. So I could actually go and play instead of, being on the sidelines or, kind of watching and observing and things like that. So I think that's what drove me a lot, especially for my formative years, living in Ghana in the late 90s and the kind of early part of the 2000s. I
Hmm.
studied a lot, and I think that's what was driving me.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and I just think on the back of my, mine too, of and you probably know a little bit of this about me, but like just how brave and dedicated you were and are still, you're still doing it today to go and do those kind of things. Cause, like I can never, I'm just gonna say this, I can never see myself sometimes doing things like as you do, cause it's like I don't have
Oh,
the,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not that I don't have the ability. It's just it's just having the right attitude to go through and just like you said to like learn and master the tradition so you can be involved. I mean, my goodness,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, mastery at a very foundational level. Yeah, I
yeah,
wouldn't call
right,
myself a master by any stretch
yeah,
of the
right, right, I
imagination.
understand
Yeah.
what you're saying. Yeah.
It's not false modesty. It's just an
Yeah,
acknowledgement. I'm,
yeah,
I'm
right,
playing with people who grew up in these traditions
right,
and have
right.
lived these traditions their whole lives. So,
Yeah.
I'm under no illusions of my outsider status.
Yeah, no, I understand. Well, I always say this about
And
music
I
too.
appreciate
Like,
that. Thank you. Yeah,
yeah, I always say it's
yeah,
about music. You can always learn so much about music, and
yeah,
even all the things I do, I never feel that I'm at all like I contribute, but that's it. It's like,
yeah, yeah. That's right.
but that's exactly going in and learning and being kind of that outsider status. Like that's, I mean, that's bravery there. I mean, goodness
Oh,
gracious,
yeah.
and
Okay,
dedication
thanks.
if you think about it that
Yeah,
way.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess like one kind of shifting from this of seeing your perspective of this. So what did and where you are today? And I know you do teach music classes occasionally, and I know you're kind of in a more of a different role right now, but I'm just interested of what you're inspired of how you're using that knowledge and the stuff that you've studied and
Mhm.
brought back and how you're bringing it back to others and kind of giving it to others, this kind of this gift of, and,
Yeah.
I will say it this way, and you'll probably appreciate this because, as
Go
you
ahead.
know, I leaned on you a couple times when I was kind of put in a role of teaching of world cultures, you know,
That's right.
um, course, and
Yeah.
not to be funny here, but a guy who has never been there, and then to talk to you was like, yeah, I walk those streets. You know what I
That's right.
mean? And heard that. So like, what kind of foundation do you like to kind of bring back to others to kind of either inspire or show or to share, I guess is the best way to describe.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I just try, and it's what I was doing in Ghana, like outside the international education stuff, but
Sure.
what I was doing from a musical perspective, and of course studying. I was there. I finished a master's degree, then eventually finished a PhD there, and I was playing all the time. I guess I just try to bring those experiences into the classroom as much as I
Hmm.
can. I think part of it is just, I think students probably appreciate the anecdotal stuff more than kind of the banging them over the head with ethnomusicological theory and whatnot,
Hmm.
like things like that. Um, but also, I think it just informs on how I teach about ethnomusicology and these
Hmm.
traditions. Um, and of course, it's easier in some topics than others. So when I remember I was brought on after I left Ghana in 2012. I took on a position of at Binghamton University. I was
Hmm.
a visiting assistant professor of music there for 5 years, and
Hmm.
I was excited to teach the music traditions of Africa course, and which was a
Okay.
writing course, and I was excited to teach the music traditions of Africa, Caribbean, Latin America.
Uh-huh.
Course in the intro to ethnomusicology course, but I also had to teach music of Asia and the Far East, and that wasn't a course where I could really bring some of my own traditions to, or some of my own
Right.
experiences rather, to bear. So of course I could have maybe as a ethnomusicologist, but it's easier in some of the courses that I teach than in others.
Right.
Thankfully most of the stuff, I had some experience obviously
Hmm.
in studying South Asian music, so I could bring some of that knowledge to bear in those courses. But it's definitely a lot easier when I'm teaching traditions that I have some familiarity with and some kind of personal experience with. And so, yeah, I just try and draw on those experiences. And I try to use videos and audio recordings that I've made to enrich the classroom. And just try and I guess not just teach about ethnomusicology, but try to demonstrate how I tried to become an ethnomusicologist in
Right.
while living in Africa, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does
Um,
make sense. No.
yeah, so I think I think that's really just it. Just trying to color my coursework with
Hmm.
anecdotes and whatever materials that I have that I can show to students or I can present to students that have a little bit more of a personal side to them. Um, I try to do that as much as I can in the classroom to make things a little bit more interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
whether I'm successful or not, I don't know. You have to ask my students.
Yeah, well, it's just interesting to me because it's kind of bringing your perspectives to the classroom, especially when you were there. And then I
Mm,
know you've have provided trips to Ghana already. You know what I mean?
right.
I've
Yeah,
taken
yeah.
students and different things like
Mhm.
that, and I know you're doing it more. And I know we keep walking around the international programs, but it seems like
Right.
you kind of have, even though I know you're not going to know every single culture, but it seems like you have a style of way of looking into cultures and trying to
Right.
understand the cultures that I think you're bringing to the students, regardless if don't know it all, about the particular
I
culture.
think that's a really good point. I think it touches on something that I've always thought. There is some, I think, connections between, my my interest and studies as an ethnomusicologist
Yeah.
and the teaching that I do, but also my work in international ed. I think in many ways they're grounded in similar
Yeah.
pursuits to try and understand, the environment and the culture that we're living in. And I think you know, I think in many ways they are connected. And sometimes I've been able to kind of draw on those connections when when I have discussions with students or putting
Right.
programming together or things like that. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, because well, and that's how just thinking about it, just because as you're talking about learning and diving into the cultures. I mean, granted, you can't. I mean, you could, but you'd be on a road trip or on trips for the rest of your life. But like as you're dumping into each community, I think you have a great perspective of you made a one point I just wanted to bring up again, that you took the time, you practiced, you understood so that you could again, not that you want to master, but that you could understand at more of a higher level with them,
Participate, yeah.
and participate, right?
Participate. I think that's the critical. Yeah, I think that's an important way of framing it. I think
Yeah.
that's really right. Um, yeah, and I think the other thing is, as ethnomusicologists, we're very influenced and impacted by anthropology. We're trying to we take we have cultural interactions or experiences that it's important for us to kind of process and try and understand what they mean and how we could refine what it is that we do. Well, at least in international ed, you want to take an experience, process it, try and think about it in a kind of more abstract way, so then you could figure out what was significant or
Mhm.
important about that cultural experience, and then kind of make adjustments, so then you don't have those kind of cross-cultural mishaps again. Um, and I think that, in many ways, ethnomusicologists try to do the same thing. I mean, we're obviously we're not interested in international ed as such, but we're doing the same kind of thing in terms of trying to adapt to maybe an environment if we're working in an environment that we're not familiar with, or within a language environment that we're not, we don't understand the language. We're trying to find or navigate our way through this kind of new context, and I think we're using the same kind of muscles uh, and similar processes to try and figure things out as we experience them. So yeah, I think there's lots of
Yeah.
connections between my interest in ethno and my work in international ed, my interest in international ed.
Yeah, very, very
Well, I
cool.
can get my students to do more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. We'll broadcast this to them, right? We'll send
That's
them a
right.
little
That's
clip.
right. That's right. Exactly. Just
So,
a 30-second TikTok of that
yeah, that's right. That's right. That's
about
right.
that. Yeah.
Or a short or whatever they're called.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I know this might be a harder question too, and I know you're a busy guy. I know you're working and have a family and traveling and doing all kinds of different stuff. But if you could just share just a little bit what you're doing still today as far as involvement in music. That I know might be little, and that's
Yeah.
okay, because I know you're still teaching and I know you still do that. But I was just interested, the online or the online lifelong learning style of
That's
things
right.
of what I'm looking at, because it seems like you're still involved, and I say that too because, in the background, it's so funny. I mean, right away there's
That's right.
instruments right
Yeah.
behind
Yeah.
you.
I curated this background just for you. Yeah.
That's right. So I mean, I
That's
know
right.
it's still in your heart and your soul. So I'm just
Yeah.
interested in, hearing what you still do today.
Well, I was teaching. I did teach an ensemble at Marist, where obviously I am. I think that's some of the reason why you can see some of the drums here is because I had to move them from the music department because there wasn't enough room for them.
And okay.
So I've got, you can't. I won't pan around the office and show you all around, but there's literally drums everywhere. Um, so so in terms of like what am I doing now musically? I'm still teaching for the past year or so, I've tried to, or I've been developing this faculty-led program that looks at the
Hmm.
relationship between, we look at religious expressions from Africa and the African diaspora. And
Hmm.
one of the things that you'll know if you kind of look at different types of religious expression from Africa and the Black Atlantic is that there's often this connection between music and the arts, um, ritual, medicine and spirituality, and healing, I guess even psychological healing. In other words, through ritual, you have music in the arts happening. You have priests and priestesses administering herbal remedies for certain afflictions. You have people consulting deities to solve particular problems in their lives. So all
Right.
these kind of things are intertwined, and I'm interested in. I've been developing programming that allows students to engage in how those things are intertwined, not only within Africa but also the African diaspora. So we look across that various religious traditions across this broad region, but then we go to Ghana and we see it kind of in action, if you will,
Hmm.
in particular parts of Ghana. So I'm doing that. I teach, like I said, I taught an ensemble. Yeah, I'd like to get back into that a little bit more. Um, I
Sure.
also teach, been teaching the world music class. I teach first year seminar that looks at the relationship between music and politics in Africa. So we look at how music and politics are intertwined, and then how that kind of manifests in different parts of the continent. I try and play when I can. I don't get as many opportunities to play
Sure.
as I once did. But whenever there is an opportunity, I try and jump on that, and then just try and also just be a support person for anything Africa on campus. And oftentimes that requires some sort of musical input. So for example, we have an African Fashion Week coming up next month, and I'm putting together a performance for kind of the opening exhibit, but also putting together a playlist for music that we could pipe into the exhibit, as it's going to run for the next 2.5 months or something like that. So any opportunities I can find to kind of get involved and find ways to present music from different parts of Africa on campus, I always jump at the chance. So yeah, so that's pretty much where I am at this point in terms of how music is kind of interacting with my professional life. Otherwise it's mostly international ed, and like I said, I think I have 3 boys that keep me extremely busy.
Yes. Yeah, and I know that. I know usually when we're talking, you're at some practice or game. So,
Right, yeah.
which
So
is
I'm in a
which
hockey
shows to
arena
be
in
a
some part of New York and New Jersey. Yeah.
yeah, which is great,
Thinking about
Y-
music constantly, of course.
Yeah, of course. Well, just as and the reason why I'm asking that, it just doesn't seem like your brain has stopped from that nurturing of music, and that's what's fascinating to me, and that's why even through the gazillion things of everything we have in our society or world that we have to take care of as an adult, as I say, we're still
Yeah.
striving for that, and that's kind of one of my
Mhm.
interests is to kind of see how people are still doing that, and even though
Yeah.
that I know your more day job now is not necessarily that, but you're still kind of embedded in the in the music making world,
Yeah, as much as I can, for sure, just as you are. Yeah.
Well, thank you. So, as we're wrapping this up, I kind
Mhm.
of want to ask one last question. It's kind of a deeper question, and I know it's gonna. I'm interested to hear your spin because most of the questions I've been asking, this last question anyway, has been more of, kind of why you still do it, that kind of side of it. So I'm looking at folks who used to perform, make music at some point in their career, in their life, I should say, and then it stopped. Okay, or the people who did it for a little bit and then there's very large gaps and those kind of different things, and I'm looking how to inspire them to come back out and play their instrument, sing, be involved with music making, or be involved, as you said, with the more of the maybe more the community side of it or the ceremonial side. So I'm just interested to hear what you have to say about that, as far as what you would say to others, uh, you know, if they want to get back into the music making world, or if they want to even start in the music making world. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Or
that's
participate in
that's
the
an
music.
excellent that's an excellent question. There's just so many, I guess, just so many distractions in life that that get in the way. I guess it's just to remind yourself why you got into it in the first place, and
Mhm,
I guess try and reignite that passion. Like, I definitely don't have the passion that I had, I think, or maybe the passion. I don't know if that's I'd spend hours practicing, when I was in my 20s, like out literally hours. I could do that. I don't think I have the hustle for that kind of passion now. I don't know if I'm less passionate or just, I don't have the time for it. But I guess, just to remind people, why they got into it in the first place. And
mhm,
I don't know, maybe if they kind of that first step, I guess it's like trying to go back to the gym, it's the first day back. This is the hardest. But if you can get through that first week or two, then yeah, it starts to it starts to flow and roll a little bit. So maybe they just have to kind of get into that, well, it's not a flow state, but they have to kind of get in, take that first step, remind yourself why you did it, take that first step, and then maybe as things start rolling, that kind of level of passion will come back, and all the kind of fringe benefits as well, as like we were talking about, community and camaraderie and friendship and improvisation and all those kinds of things that nourish us as musicians. Maybe all that stuff will come back too. I don't know. That's hope that's a good enough answer for now. That's
No,
all I can
yeah,
think about.
yeah, that's great. No,
Yeah,
it's well said actually, because
yeah.
I think it is kind of stepping in there, and and I'll say this because I know I brought this up, but just
Mm,
having the dedication, just like you, it's like, yeah, I'm just gonna go to Ghana and learn about music, and
mm,
and step out of your comfort zone, because I
mm.
know sometimes you will make it, so it's just what you do, just like you said, after the first couple weeks or the first couple days, sticking with it. It might be hard, but you'll learn. So that was very well said.
So what are you telling people? I know we're wrapping up, but
Yeah, sure.
if obviously this has been an important, important reason for you developing this
Yeah.
podcast. What is it that you're learning in terms of, um, you know, uh, what are other people telling? Let me say it this way: what are other people also saying, or what's resonating with you in terms of what you might say to
Yeah.
somebody who's kind of been out of the game for a little bit, but might be interested in coming back.
Yeah. Look at the teacher in you, by the way, getting asking the question to me. Look at that.
Yeah,
That's
there you
good.
go. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, what I'm always seeing is I see this, just like you say, this motivation. I mean, I'll talk about two different folks. I see this motivation with particular people who did it in high school or did it sometime during what I call the institution. So in other words, they were in high school or elementary or even middle school, or and then possibly went on to college, and then it stops. And then they have in their mind that it was something that they just did when they were in school for some reason. And it's kind of funny to me because then if that reignites, because they want to relive that experience and relive, like you said, the community, the camaraderie, that style of it, they're like, it's just, it changes their world, and you can look, and especially, I mean, in research, if you want to go down that way, I mean, there's so many things to talk about with identity where people just get, oh, well, I guess I could consider myself a musician then, because they don't really feel like they just, sort of dabbled in it, and whether or not they consider professional or amateur, it's just what I'm finding is if they're challenged, they'll do it. And one
Mm,
thing I'll just share, and it's, I don't feel like it's anything special with me, but what I found and what I've been enjoying is, kind of some of the performance initiatives that we're doing, like you've probably seen them on Facebook, because I know you've been commenting. When we'll have our concert, I'll come down and, I don't pick easy music. And there's a reason for that. It's more of, well, first of all, I don't want a watered down thing. I want something to be meaningful. And everybody rises to the challenge. You know what I mean? And that's what is, and that's what I'm still like trying to fill in, is where it is that they're gonna engage and whatever it's gonna take to do that. And just like how you said, I know a lot of people who are practicing prior to coming to those initiatives. And just like how you said, I'm in the 20s, I was practicing, or how you were just saying how you're gonna practice enough so that you can participate. And that's exactly what they're doing.
mhm.
So,
So
and
I answered the question
yeah, you
half an hour
answered the
ago.
question in that. So, and that's what's fascinating to me. And that's what that's why I'm striving to do this, is because I just want to show people that they can do this, you know what I mean, in the realm of what they want. And I'm not just saying it has to be band, it doesn't have to be instrumental. It could
Yeah,
be choir, it could be orchestra, it
yeah,
could be,
yeah, for sure.
it could be anything that making music, and
Mhm.
that's what's fascinating to me, because I think just a lot of people don't use their talent,
Yeah, yeah,
you
that's a
know.
good point. Yeah. Well, I'm glad I read the notes you gave me beforehand so that I could tee all that up for you.
Well, make sure your payments coming your way, right?
Yeah, no problem. Venmo or cash. Yeah, anyone.
That's right. Well, hey, I want to thank you so much for, being
Thank
on
you.
this. I appreciate it. And I will
Yeah.
say this, I know you're very dedicated to sharing to others and helping
Mm,
others.
mm,
And, I have to say that, just bringing your experiences back into the classroom and helping beyond in the national community is just amazing. And I will also publicly say this, because I know you've helped me quite a bit with when, hey, you're going to teach a world cultures music class. And I'm like, yeah, I've never, other than maybe taken one a long time ago, of how helpful you were. So I just want to thank you for all those, for all that help and all that service that you're providing. Because, as we all are music teachers, we want to inspire others. So thank you.
I'm grateful for you saying that. You're making me blush, but yeah, that's very nice of you to say.
Well, thank you so much, Gavin.
Yeah, my pleasure.